Welcome back to my channel, Famous and Fabulous. In the late 1980s, filthy dancing was popular. Electric chemistry up the screen, heart pounding and unforgettable music dancing scenes. It became into a worldwide phenomena that causes Jennifer Grey and Patrick encounters well-known people. But while sparks flew around the globe on camera, in the background there were numerous difficulties, particularly during filming of the now famous montage of Hungry Eyes. No one was aware that Jennifer Grey was concealing anything that would only be discovered by, several light years later, it was established that once made public, painted a very different image of the actual events that took place on set. Before Baby and Johnny, Bad One Red Dawn Red danced into the history of film. Dawn is a movie whose backstage. The tone for everything was set by friction. It was going to happen when Jennifer, according to Grey, Patrick Swayze had been paired with her in Dirty Dancing. According to reports, their history's heart fell wasn't one of friendly companionship or jovial teasing. Instead, it extended back to Red Dawn, a very different film, and it wasn't at all great. It was released in Red Dawn was a Cold War era film released in 1984, a movie about several high school students who turn into guerrilla warriors following the Soviet Union's invasion of the United States. The film was tense, intense, and physically taxing behind the scenes, but it was also exhausting. Stew of energy and egos that Patrick observes played a challenging takeover for Jedi, character that reflects Swayze's own character at the moment, Jennifer as Tony Mason. Grey's involvement was smaller. One of the youthful combatants. As the ensemble grew closer after their arduous shooting, not everyone's schedule in New Mexico Swayze was a trained friend who left, former gymnast and dancer, and he was renowned for treating his work with great care. He plunged headfirst into his role with laser intensity and discipline, akin to those of the military. However, his intensity frequently came over as domineering. He allegedly had a tendency to maintaining character in between takes, even in the absence of the cameras. The method approach was effective for action moments, but some found it difficult to win or feel at ease in his presence. Conversely, Jennifer Grey was more impulsive and sensitive to her feelings. She trusted her intuition and had a gentler, more fluid approach to during Red Dawn. She discovered Swayze being too combative and masculine, and occasionally even frightening. He adored joking and pulling practical jokes, while many of them, in her opinion, went too far at one moment when Jennifer Grey was being filmed, complained about how Swayze would play around while things were serious, causing her to struggle to remain in the appropriate emotional space while their working styles didn't mesh well. And there later on, Jennifer Grey acknowledged that she thought he was nice in bursts, but is challenging to deal with. In general, she said he was masculine and someone who had to be a bit of a show-off overseeing each scenario for her to work with. Swayze was to walk on eggshells, never really understand the tone if he would take her or be, in honestly. After Red Dawn finished, she hoped they wouldn't collaborate ever again. She had no idea what was going to happen next. Ice and fire casting. When the Dirty Dancing team started the search for their leads, they encountered a formidable question. The relationship between Baby and Johnny had to be believable and dynamic and intensely sentimental. They required fire and susceptibility, stress and bonding. Jennifer Grey was previously selected for Frances Baby Houseman's part. However, Johnny's discovery of her proved to be rather more difficult, and then Patrick Swayze's name appeared, had the ideal appearance, charm, and most crucial, dance instruction. But he also formally dated Jennifer Grey, and the memory of their conflict wasn't pleasant, lingered for Jennifer during Red Dawn. Thus, when his name was called for the Jennifer Grey, the male lead in Dirty Dancing, was immediately uneasy, so she informed She was uncertain about the casting team, working with him on another project, but the male lead was desperately needed by the filmmakers. With genuine dancing, charisma, and masculinity, they thought Swayze was the only performer who was able to physically and emotionally fit Johnny's role castle. and chose to extend an invitation to him for the castings. However, things then took an unforeseen twist right before their screen test together. Swayze drew her away, gazed into her eyes and expressed regret. Jennifer Grey remembered in her own words. He declared, "I'm so in love with you. I apologize. But I know you don't want me to the film." His voice broke and he started crying. Jennifer Grey's eyes filled with tears. The guard was still on duty, although at that time, she noticed that he was odd. Wasn't the domineering, ostentatious actor she recalling Red Dawn? He was, "We could kill it if it were vulnerable. If we did this, it would kill it," he informed her. Everything changed in that one moment. Jennifer, against her better judgment, Grey consented to take him through a screen test. The events of that test were altered. They entered the screen and everything test, and a miraculous event occurred. Tension that they had previously melted into intensity. They had electric energy. The producers were taken aback by that indisputable. Jennifer's chemistry was genuine and not phony. Grey's charming shyness and strength in some ways, their presence clashed and danced, that seemed genuine and vibrant. The parts were, their chemistry was unmistakable, even electric, yet the strain that brewed on Red Dawn years before hadn't disappeared. It had merely been buried, awaiting the ideal opportunity to reappear. And once they started shooting, unclean dancing, all the unsolved friction would return quickly before it turned into a battleground where magic production wasn't a smooth route, relocated to North Carolina's Lake Lure, where the filming conditions rapidly pushed. The weather was so bad that everyone was on edge, oppressive, hot and humid. The budget was, cast and crew were pressed for time, frequently put up long hours in unpleasant heat. With minimal margin for mistake, costumes were repurposed, and sets were simple. Places that are occasionally hardly held, even notices that his knee is hurt. Throughout the shooting schedule and during the filming was continuously modified to accommodate. Jennifer Grey's recuperation was still unsure of Swayze's unpredictable nature. Consequently, she had to handle both the pressure of playing the lead and the emotional burden of her prior encounters with him. Yet in the midst of everything, that uneasiness is a tale of loving class, and rebellion began to emerge. But, however, the true drama wasn't limited to screen. It was developing in the background. And what transpired off camera during Dirty Dancing would remain a memorable experience. As viewers observed in theaters behind the Dirty Dancing scenes after they were filmed officially, started the Dirty Dancing, a moment of solidarity between Jennifer Grey and Patrick Swayze began to wane. Sincere apologies and the rapport between the. Although the screen test was authentic, they didn't eliminate the conflicting personalities that had destroyed bridges years before. The gap between Jennifer Grey's and gentle perceptive method and observer swiftly acquired a meticulous style reappeared as the camera rolled. Patrick Swayze's years of stress having completed dance training. He was a ballet dancer with classical training and had previously given a professional performance. Changing to play Jennifer Grey had no formal training in dance in comparison. She expressed herself passionately and emotionally invested in her role, but she frequently found choreography difficult. And rhythm. This discrepancy turned into a often frustrating source, not just for her, but Patrick also observes. They had to reshoot scene after scene, dozens of times at times, because Jennifer Grey was unable to contain her calmness. She would become anxious, laughing too much, or finding it difficult to keep up with the choreographies. Beat as a disciplined and earnest performer, Patrick Swayze was impatient with such interruptions. The strain of a tight. The filming schedule wasn't beneficial, according to some sequences would start for the crew members, with them gazing at each other and hardly talking, each other immediately before the cameras rolled, but after a call to action, their fury would cause them to revert to their positions. Additionally, embarrassment feeds the romantic stress that the viewer would eventually experience love with. This wasn't merely a situation where Jennifer Grey's creative differences, Patrick occasionally felt like he was getting close, transcend the boundary between being fervent and intrusive. During dance practice, he frequently assumed responsibility for fixing her form or making an effort to direct her performance in ways things made her feel devalued or denigrated. Actress Jennifer Grey Patrick Swayze, who worked instinctively, was a dancer who thrived on accuracy. Disparities led to a conflict not only of techniques, but of crew members' ego. Allegedly had to keep them apart between takes occasionally, and even though Swayze was admired for his ability and motivation, thought he came out as overbearing in the way he dealt with Grey in a private setting. Occasionally, voiced annoyance and unease, expressing that she felt overshadowed. She wasn't intimidated by Swayze's commanding presence, wished to follow his lead as a puppet. She desired to participate as a partner in the performance. Paradoxically, this exact tension became the source of the film's unrefined emotional strength. When the infant appears anxious, feeling uncomfortable with Johnny, it wasn't only acting. A large portion of what viewers seen on stemmed from an actual unscripted, the two leads' emotional energy. Nevertheless, there was a scene in specifically where all of that conflict, the mistakes, mistrust, and stress appeared to burst into something. It became the most memorable and unforgettable scene in the movie, and it was among the lift scene is the most difficult to film. Dirty Dancing scene is among the most memorable scenes in movie history. It has been parodied, reenacted, and admired for decades, yet not many are aware how much actual fear and emotional strain encircled that instance behind the scenes. Jennifer Grey had torn into Patrick and noticed his arms as he lifted her above his head and into the air. This maneuver required flawless execution, timing, power, and, above all, trust. But there wasn't much trust at Jennifer Grey at that point in the shoot, had never done the lift previously, and even more unexpected is the fact that Cher refused to practice it because she was afraid. Even though she is an actress with a lot of Jennifer Grey, was quite afraid. Fear, becoming hurt or dropped, sees with the mindset and perfectionism of his dancer thought. This was really annoying. Felt that preparation and repetition were important, even though Jennifer Grey was depending on instinct and adrenaline to carry her through the addition of the filming circumstances to the scene's pressure, in contrast to the earlier lift that was routinely practiced in the famous last lift at Freezing Lake. They performed their climactic dance indoors, although it was still much more nerve-wracking due to the necessity of flawless previous practice sessions for other dance sequences spoke to the strain. Getting to this point, one especially famous scene where Baby's arm is touched by Johnny and her outburst of laughter wasn't prearranged. Jennifer Grey continued to laugh in that manner, uncontrollably during each take, so he grew so angry that he couldn't comprehend why she was unable to hold it. Director Emile Ardelino along urged the performers to improvise, and frequently continued to record even if actors and actresses deviated from the original script. For instance, in the scene where Grey was to accompany her in standing in front of Swayze, she turned back to him and raised her arm behind him, his fingers as he traced his head, down her arm in a position reminiscent of, despite being written, the movie Posteros, an intimate and solemn time. Jennifer Grey was worn out and discovered the move irritable and unable to stop laughing. Swayze tried it every time, regardless of how Adelino requested Swayze for numerous takes, and he was eager to complete the scene and discover Gay's actions are bothersome. But the producers concluded that the sequence was effective as it was and fully included it into the movie. As Jennifer Grey giggles and observes, the filmmakers noticed a frustrated look, something actual at that precise moment, something raw, electrifying, and decided to leave it in the movie in spite of all this mayhem when it was time to record the famous last lift. They completed it in a single take with during the rehearsal, there was only tension and adrenaline, and for some reason, it worked. Shot turned into the poignant culmination of the film and a scene that viewers have loved. But ever since, the stress, and their differences had been growing during the filming process, earlier in the filming of one of the more personal. The dance montage's scenes set to Hungry Eyes. Things were already at a standstill, boiling point. What took place in that moment was something that Jennifer Grey retained. Over years, something she kept to herself, didn't discuss till a long time later, and when she did, the response was explosive material that Grey hid there, pulsive actions, the hungry eyes in Dirty Dancing. Montage is frequently recalled as a light-hearted, sensual time of a budding love affair. Set to Eric Carmen's melodic melody, encapsulates the baby and Johnny's spark during. The scene shows dance rehearsals, flirty and playful, on screen full of timid looks and playful touches, and coordinated motion. However, behind the camera, the truth was much more. Patrick and Jennifer Grey's tumultuous relationship was just managing to keep it together at this moment in the movie, while viewers observed the chemistry that was actually taking place, was the mental stress that had been simmering for several weeks. Grey is already emotionally unstable due to the lengthy process and persistent problems with her co-star was overextended. In this moment, the scene known as for frequent physical contact and real romantic tension, which is something that grew increasingly challenging to fabricate. Patrick has now seen an increase in irritated by Grey's tardiness, and every pause, every laugh, every missed cue evaluated on him, based on source. Screw member's eyes started to crack. In between takes, he whispered beneath his. He rolled his eyes and exhaled. His tone reportedly went cold at one time. Had to be spoken to after storming off set. Into bringing back Jennifer Grey in the interim remained silent, sensing the increasing contempt, particularly in the scenes where they needed to press their bodies. She would subsequently characterize his gaze as very near. Throughout these practice sessions as one of, she felt it intensely, not out of love, but revulsion. But she decided to conceal it at the moment. Raising your voice could have put her career, or worse, the set was already stressed up because of the busy schedule and budget, and Grey was worried about being perceived as challenging if she spoke. It wasn't until several decades later in a new interview that Jennifer Grey eventually, and it's bad, she told her, explained in depth how estranged and she felt devalued in these scenes. Her remarks were painful and direct. He was revolting her because he was so chilly. Described how Patrick's glances provided her with what was intended to be to her, the scenes scorching, genuinely patronizing and bitter. That she carried emotional burdens in quiet was hidden beneath grins and light-hearted fans of the choreography never suspected. The montage turned into one of the most scenes in a love film that, standout history, it encapsulated a tense emotional state that appeared sincere since it was, but not as viewers had anticipated. You can see the intensity of emotion in that. The scene was not the result of skillful acting. Alone, it was a sophisticated combination of burying and controlling frustration. Jennifer Grey was battling resentment, must maintain her poise as Patrick watches, struggled with his own annoyance that. Ironically, friction provided the picture with its crackling edge. Following this, the manufacturers had to take action because there was worry that the two stars' hatred for one another might jeopardize the love movie's filming scenes. To address Eleanor, the writer Bergstein and Emile Ardolino, the director made Patrick Swayze and Jennifer Grey watch their first screen tests again, those with the amazing chemistry. This produced the intended outcome, and the actors were permitted to reprise their roles. With fresh vigor and excitement following recording the finale of the Grand Dance, which was the movie's climax lift scene, was prepared for the post-procedure phase and the theaters, yet nobody, even the producers, could have anticipated what would take place following Dirty Dancing's at last made available to the general public. The huge success in the 1980s, when Dirty August 1987 saw the release of Dancing in theaters, but given the limited budget, one had high expectations. Movie without any big performers and a straightforward narrative that takes place in the early 1960s. But there was something about it, that strong connection with audiences, and word of mouth circulated quickly. In just a few weeks, the film finally became a box office sensation. earning more than $214 million globally. What started off as a low-key, discreet release developed into a full-fledged cultural Jennifer Grey and Patrick's Phenomena Swayze became instantly well-known worldwide, fell in love with Baby's story, and Johnny and two unsuitable lovers from many universes united by dance's soundtrack achieved multiple platinum awards, featuring tunes like I've Had a Great Time, Life turning into a radio mainstay. The movie won an Academy Award for the greatest original composition, together with a Golden Globe confirming its status as a popular song. However, even though the electric chemistry was praised by the public between Patrick Swayze and Jennifer Grey, sentimental reality of their Grey's performances were eventually hidden, acknowledged that she needed to digest a lot of complicated emotions following the movie's release, The Dirty Making Experience Dancing. Despite all of its discomfort, private grief and unsaid tensions were difficult to forget, but she also came to observe how the difficulties she encountered provided the film's authenticity and unvarnishedness. Acting wasn't the only source of tension on screen. Because it was genuine, people associated with it, in spite of their challenging relationship between Jennifer Grey and Patrick Swayze, recognized that they developed jointly over time, that their resentment subsided, and they were reconciled. In 2004, a theme based on Dirty Dancing documentary, and had the opportunity to consider Grey, talked with them about their shared past. Admiration for Swayze's commitment and skill while observing prior to his death. In 2009, publicly acknowledged Grey's emotional sensitivity and development as an actor. In fact, he acknowledged that he may have been too harshly hinting at her while filming, at a silent acknowledgement of the strain. They had never talked about the movies. Long-term success also influenced both of their professions in effective ways. For Jennifer, Grey's portrayal of Baby turned into a defining moment, but she persisted in act in latter life. She frequently discussed how difficult it was to separate from the picture of the naive girl from Dirty Patrick Swayze. However, is dancing become a well-known figure in Hollywood, to appear in popular films such as Ghost and Point Break. But regardless of how far when their careers took them, they were constantly, primarily remembered as Baby and Johnny reflecting on Dirty Dancing, and the pace evolved into more than a film. It was a story that encapsulated a particular moment in time. Millions of people's hearts while discreetly hiding the emotional cost incurred in its creation. Long before the notoriety and the fantastic reviews, this movie was full of tense laughter, missed cues, and rehearsals that are frustrating. One more than any other represented this combination of a failed screen test that combines beauty and difficulty, caught in a video clip that almost wrecked everything years before it started. Emil Ardolino, a subsequent director, would give his lucky stars credit for his choice. To disregard the initial screen test and proceed to the next person who persuaded everyone who saw Grey may actually bring the characters of Dirty Dancing with Johnny and Baby not only made him a household name in Hollywood, but furthermore established a legacy that is about 40 years old and still very much alive today. Years later, Dirty Dancing's legacy. The thoughts of Jennifer Grey on Dirty Dancing during the years after. Its success has been achieved with elegance and sincerity, in spite of the challenging times while filming. Grey eventually discovered herself, realizing the worth of what they already possessed, made jointly following Swayze's sharing. The significance of their reunion, especially in his last years, when Grey received a cancer diagnosis, contacted him in private, and she later stated that Patrick was an uncommon and a lovely, complex, and kind individual. This sentiment relates to the change in their relationship from a state of conflict to one of reciprocal respect and comprehension, as they both came to comprehend how their previous disputes had provided their on-screen collaboration and its genuineness. The death of Patrick Swayze in 2009 was profoundly impacted Jennifer Grey, and throughout time that ensued, she opened much more about their relationship's dynamics, while Dirty Dancing was being produced. Even though he was deemed repulsive in previous interviews when the injury was, she is still a little open and now talks to profound regard and appreciation for him, recognizing that they're volatile. One of the things that made their Bond Dirty Dancing performances that are so realistic continues to be among the most recognizable and favorite movies of all time. It tells the tale of dance and forbidden love, went beyond its modest beginnings to develop into a cultural touchstone. Despite the unseen conflicts now, behind-the-scenes footage is included in those conflicts in the history of the cinema, ultimately aided in the film's Jennifer Gay's enduring enthusiasm, choice to retain the suffering of their relationship behind closed doors, permitted the film's unadulterated passion to be seen, establishing a sincere relationship with. The legacy of Dirty Dancing for audiences demonstrates that genuine feeling. Whether it is possible to weave passion, joy, or suffering into art in ways that make it memorable. What are your thoughts? Please feel free to share your filthy dancing remarks in the space provided. Thank you. Thank you for viewing, and I'll see you soon. Video.